Okay, let's kick off with something that really makes you stop and think. May 2025. Turns out it was the second warmest May globally since we even started keeping proper records.
Yeah, right away that sets the stage, doesn't it? We're clearly still in this significant warming trend.
Exactly. So in this deep dive, we want to help you, our listeners, get a clear handle on what's actually happening right now with global warming. We're going to cut through some of the noise using the latest data, primarily from the EU's Copernicus Climate Change Service, C3S,
Mm-hmm. And we'll also pull in some perspectives from related reports, things highlighted by Al Jazeera looking at attribution science and emissions trends.
Right, sources like World Weather Attribution, Carbon Brief, getting that fuller picture.
Exactly.
Our goal here is pretty straightforward. Give you the most crucial takeaways. What does this recent data tell us about warming, about climate action, so you feel properly informed?
Let's dive in then.
Okay, so let's unpack this, that headline number you mentioned, second warmest May.
That's right. The C3S Bolton confirms it. It wasn't the warmest, but second place is still, well, very high up there.
And they put a number on the average temperature increase, right, above the pre-industrial level.
Yep. For May, the global average surface temperature was 1.4 degrees Celsius, above that 1850 to 1900 baseline.
That baseline we always use before, industrialization really kicked things into high gear climate-wise.
Precisely. But here's the really fascinating bit, I think.
Go on.
Despite being so warm overall, May 2025 was actually the first month in, get this, 22 months.
22, wow.
Where the global average temperature did not go over the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming threshold.
Okay, hold on. So nearly 2 years straight above 1.5 C, and then May dipped just below it.
That's the data, yeah. A definite break in that long, long run.
That number, 1.5 C, it really jumps out. Even if it's just 1 month's dip, it feels like something. Remind us again, why is that 1.5 figure the one everyone focuses on?
Well, it's that key threshold from the Paris Agreement, the more ambitious target. Scientists have warned consistently that going beyond 1.5 degrees, especially long-term, seriously ramps up the risks.
Risks of what exactly?
More extreme weather, irreversible damage to ecosystems, much worse sea level rise. The list goes on. So staying below it, even temporarily, gets attention after such a long streak above it.
Got it. So a dip below. But what's the expert take on this? Did Carlo Bontempo, the C3S director, see this as like a turning point?
Not exactly turning point, no. His comments were quite measured. He acknowledged it breaks this unprecedentedly long sequence. He even called it a brief respite for the planet.
A respite, okay.
But crucially, he immediately added that he fully expects we'll see months exceeding 1.5 C again in the near future.
Oh.
Why? Because of the continued warming of the climate system, the underlying trend hasn't changed, basically.
So, interesting data point, a temporary pause in that specific metric, but the bigger picture remains the same, according to the scientists.
That seems to be the message, yes.
Okay, so May was warm overall, second warmest. Where was this heat most pronounced? Did C3S specify?
They did. The bulletin pointed to several regions where temperatures were most above average. We're talking Western Antarctica, a big chunk of the Middle East and Western Asia, also northeastern Russia and northern Canada.
Quite a spread across the globe then.
Definitely. Not concentrated in just one spot.
And how does this translate from data points into, real life for people, the lived experience?
That's where other parts of the reporting come in. They highlighted Jacobabad city in Pakistan's Sindh province. People there were facing just brutal heat, high 40s Celsius, sometimes hitting 50 degrees.
50 degrees Celsius, that's 122 Fahrenheit. Just unimaginable heat for daily life.
Absolutely. And it's not in a vacuum, is it?
Yeah.
You mentioned the context earlier.
Yeah, the report mentioned a deadly heat wave the previous June in southern Pakistan. Over 560 people died. It adds such a grim perspective.
It really does. And there was a quote from Friedrich Otto. She's a climate scientist at Imperial College London.
What did she say?
She talked about a heat wave being, say, 20 degrees Celsius above average in that region.
Yep.
She said it sounds maybe abstract, but it's a really big deal for this part of the world.
Affects everything, I imagine.
Massively, she said. Affects the whole world. And then she made that really direct link. She said, without climate change, this would have been impossible.
Wow. Stark. Impossible without climate change. How can they be so sure? How does that attribution science actually work?
Well, groups like World Weather Attribution, they use these quite sophisticated methods. They basically compare the likelihood of an event, like that heat wave, happening in today's climate versus a world without our added greenhouse gases.
Okay.
So they run climate models under both scenarios. When the difference is huge or an event is virtually impossible in the no climate change world, they can make statements like that. It's about quantifying the human influence.
Right. So that 20C anomaly she mentioned isn't just hotter than usual. It's pushing into territory made possible, or much more likely, by overall warming.
Exactly. It can cross critical thresholds for human health, for infrastructure, for water supplies, things that are life-altering in those regions.
Makes sense. And it wasn't just heat affecting people, right? There was something about ice melt, too.
Yes. The World Weather Attribution report also flagged Greenland. During a May heat wave that also hit Iceland, Greenland's massive ice sheet was observed melting 17 times faster than the past average for that time of year.
17 times faster. Another tangible impact.
A very direct physical consequence, linked to those same warming patterns.
Okay, so the science side seems clear. Continued warming, real impacts, even with that temporary dip below 1.5 C in May. But what about the response? What are we actually doing about it globally? That picture seems, well, a lot messier.
Messy is a good word. The report's paint a picture of very different approaches, different priorities playing out across the globe. It's definitely not a unified front.
Take the U.S., for example. The reporting mentioned President Trump's focus on boosting fossil fuels, the drill, baby drill idea.
Right. That's one direction.
But at the same time, you see the impacts hitting home, like those terrible fires near Los Angeles late last year. And then there's this other pressure point emissions from tech, from AI and data centers, apparently surging, according to an ITU report.
It's a complex mix of signals, isn't it? Economic drivers, political aims, and environmental realities all interacting.
Then you contrast that with China. What did the analysis from Carbon Brief suggest there?
They offered a different perspective. Their analysis suggests China's emissions might have actually peaked.
Peaked already? How?
Well, they point to a massive build-out of renewables, wind and solar, plus nuclear power, and that leading to less reliance on coal, specifically in the power sector.
Did they have numbers on that?
They did. They cited emissions being down 1.6% year-on-year in the first quarter of 2025 and down 1% over the most recent 12-month period.
Interesting.
Yeah, the analysis framed it as potentially entering a phase of peak and sustained decline, at least for the power sector, if that pattern holds. Of course, total emissions are more than just power, but it's a significant potential shift.
A potentially very different trajectory being signaled there. Okay, what about Europe, the EU?
They seem to be putting forward a message of progress on their own targets. They announced their 27 member states are well on track.
On track for what goal?
Their target of cutting greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030 compared to 1990 levels. That's quite ambitious.
Well, how are they doing?
They reported emissions are already down 37% since 1990. And importantly, they highlighted that this happened while their collective economy grew by nearly 70% in the same period.
Ah, so they're making that decoupling argument.
Exactly. The EU Commissioner, Wopke Hoekstra, was quoted saying, "It proves climate action and growth go hand in hand." That's the narrative they're presenting.
So U.S. pushing fossil fuels in some ways, China potentially peaking emissions through renewables, EU claiming decoupled green growth. Very different stories.
Very different. And then there was one more example, smaller scale perhaps, but still relevant.
The Caribbean.
Yeah, the report mentioned Caribbean leaders meeting to plan ways to restore mangrove forests.
Mangroves. Why is that significant in this context?
Well, it highlights a different kind of approach. Mangroves are great at absorbing carbon dioxide, so that helps mitigate climate change itself. But they also act as natural barriers, protecting coastlines from storm surges and sea level rise, which are obviously huge concerns in the Caribbean. So it's about both mitigation and adaptation, nature-based solutions.
Right, tackling both the cause and the effect. Okay, so let's try and pull this together. We've got the hard data. Persistent warming overall, serious impacts being felt right now.
Like the heat in Pakistan, the accelerated ice melt.
Interrupted by this 1-month statistical dip below the 1.5 C threshold, which scientists expect to be temporary.
Right, a brief respite, not a reversal of the underlying trend.
And set against that scientific reality, we have this global landscape of action that's, well, all over the place.
Conflicted, you could say. Different priorities, different strategies, different levels of urgency, it seems.
From pushing more fossil fuels to potentially peaking emissions via renewables to steady progress on targets to focusing on natural defenses. It's a real patchwork.
It certainly highlights the immense challenge of getting truly coordinated global action, doesn't it?
It does. So thinking about the expert prediction that we'll likely be back above 1.5 C soon, and seeing these very different paths countries are on regarding energy, emissions, adaptation, what does this mixed global momentum, this sort of push and pull we're seeing, what does it truly tell you, the listener, about our collective ability to actually get on top of this long-term warming trend?
Yeah, that's the big question hanging over all this data, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can this fragmented approach really deliver what the science says is needed? Something to really think about.